African Explorers of the New World by Harold G. Lawrence. When assessing the cultures of early Africa, many historians have sought to convenience meanings by discrediting various techniques of black people of the continent. Changing the confinement of slave trade justification and colonial ideologies and fostering such words as primitive, savage, heathen, childlike, and inhuman, these writers were limited from the beginning and failed too often to give black Africans the just praise of their accomplishments. On the contrary, the trend was detracted from rather an odd and already unknown. As a result, where Africa exhibits signs of greatness, steps were taken immediately to stress the responsible people were not Negroes, really Negroid, but instead Hamites, Arabs, dark whites, Semites, Hindus, or Muslim, or some other name that avoided the apparent qualities of black skin and woolly hair. On other occasions, positive facts from the African past were supposedly purposely overlooked. In the ancient manuscripts were told of such dismissive tall tales and simple glorifications. In short, few observers attempt to break from the acceptable approach and report, and the facts, without colorations, were forced to overprove their convictions or mention them vaguely in passing. Such has been the fatal report on pre-Columbian African expedition to the Americas. While this information has escaped attention and the interest of many, Africans may view it with more concern. They are not so prone to overlook the facts they have been treated by as nonsense by others. And in this respect, it's their point of view which really matters. Consequently, the possibility of an early African excursion to the Americas must be approached from this perspective. That the Africans voyaged across the Atlantic before the era of Christopher Columbus is no recent belief. Scholars have long speculated that the great seafaring nation would send ships to America once existed on the African west coast. Details remain scant, but those who are available leave little doubt that such a venture took place. This can be attributed to the fact that more information about African history is being published and that archaeologists and anthropologists have a deepening of our awareness of various people and cultures of pre-Columbian America. We can now positively state that the Mandigos of Mali and the Songhai empires and possibly other Africans crossed the Atlantic to carry on trade with the Western Hemisphere Indians, and is further succeeded in establishing colonies throughout the Americas. During the 13th century, Mali, the greatest of all these two great shipbuilding empires, built on the ruins of Ghana, arose to become one of the leading nations in the world. Its prominence during the Middle Ages should not be underestimated. Under its authority, Western African civilization flourished with learning and trade. Timbuktu, a commercial center, became a popular university city on the face of the globe, entertaining noted scholars from all parts that went there to compare their manuscripts. Books on the subject were written in both Mandingo and Arabic. The Nin, Mali's second most important city, metropolis, could boast of 42,000 teachers at the close of the 12th century. This empire of black people, and remarkable that it demonstrated the Negro's large capacity for government and commerce. Reaching into the Atlantic Ocean from Senegal and Gambia tributaries, it covered an area about the size of Western Europe, from Portugal to Germany, and dwarfed its contemporary, the Holy Roman Empire. There were well-kept roads, rest houses, and a postal system. Superb agricultural techniques such as crop rotation, irrigation, and soil conservation was employed, and numerous vegetable varieties were produced. The people wore fine original clothing, as imported from Egyptian fabrics, and soldiers adorned themselves with golden armor and weapons. The emperor was capable of mobilizing 200,000 well-equipped men to do battle. His royal court literally overflowed with pupils, readers, and poets. Ibn Battuta, a Moorish traveler who visited Mali during the 14th century, commented on the complete security of the country and the surpassing beauty of its women. Though he had spent most of his life visiting most advanced civilizations at the time, he added that he knew there was no other nation more civilized except probably his own Morocco. The Mali Empire started on this road of importance during the reign of Sakura, 1285 to 1300 AD. The usurper who vastly extended his domain included much of Mauritania and established diplomatic relations with Morocco. From this new contract, advanced marine techniques and the concept of the earth roundedity flooded into the fast-growing empire. This is made possible through geographies and astronomical theories such as Arab writers by Abu Zaid, Masri, Idris, and Agasari, and Abu Feta, and those who from the court of Hassan el-Rashid, with whom the Moroccans were thoroughly familiar with. Both ostriches and Abu Feta stressed the rounding of the earth, and the latter even spoke of voyages around the world. It was not until later, however, that this little known and seldomly mentioned ruler elected to use his empire stirring information. This daring monarch, Abubakar II, 1305 to 1307, did not believe that it was impossible to conquer the limits of the neighboring ocean. Employing Arab navigators who had knowledge of longitude and latitude, the compass, and Durant and the sextant, he equipped 400 ships with men, food, and water, and gold, and a sufficient quantity of extended duration, and sent them sailing across the Atlantic. His captains were informed not to return to discover land or exhausted their supplies. After a long absence, the sole ship returned, and his captain informed Mansa Abubakari that the other ship had been caught in a violent turn like a river in the middle of the ocean and had been carried away by it. Irritated by his captain's failure to follow the others, the king equipped a fleet of 2,000 warships in the same manner as the first expedition, and decided to lead them personally across the perilous sea. He was so certain of his return that he named Mansa Musa could simply confer power in the hands of his brother Musa until he might come back to reclaim it. Thus, the people of Mali will open the way for West African trade relations with the West Indians. Musa Khan Ganga Musa reported that these exploits of his adventurous brother eventually became the absolute master of the empire, 1307 to 1333. Nothing is known of the interest of conquering the Atlantic, but during his reign, Mali reached the apogee of his power. Aside from making new territory conquests, Musa did much to develop commerce and education. The wealth of Mali soon became known as far away as Egypt, and Sankara University, Timbuktu, attracted the learned professors in the world. At that time, long after Khan Musa's death, the maps of Europe carried his name and attributed the whole West Africa to his dominion. In the 15th century, another empire of powerful people emerged to challenge Mali's supremacy. These were the Sanke, who had over 2,000 years been the Mandingo vessels. They eventually overthrew their Mali masters, and under the leadership of Sani Ali, 1464 to 1492, started an empire which claimed authority over the entire Western African bulge. The borders of the empire stretched in size approximately that of the continental United States. This is not a new empire, for the great deal of the old Mali structure remained intact. At the onset, only the ruling lineage was changed. Akasa Muhammad Torre, 1493 to 1528, gained control of Sanghay after the death of Sani Ali and devoted his energies in strengthening the empire. He recruited a professional army of prisoners and slaves, which allowed the rest of the population to develop commerce, farming, and other industries. Learning was encouraged through contacts made with doctors, scientists, mathematicians, and scholars throughout the Muslim world. Schools were established everywhere, and the intellectual of the empire was raised enormously. The practice of medicine advanced to the point where doctors were performing some surgeries, such as the removal of cataracts, which were not known to Europe for another 250 years. Timbuktu and Damascus retained its academic vigor, which they were inherited from Mali, but its supremacy in education commenced was contested by such other growing metropolises as Gano, Ouattara, Moti, Babin, Ngana, Sandstanding, and Balaraga. Despite these intellectual changes, Timbuktu still remained the academic hub of all of Africa and perhaps the entire world. Under Iskosi the Great, Sanghay developed a very complex system of government and administration. In fact, in some respect, its structure gave it an appearance of a constitutional monarchy with democratic tendencies. Elected governors called Faharing were assigned to rule over subdivisions of the empire, and chiefs called No were appointed to administer provinces and large cities. Economically speaking, banking and credit was well managed and controlled. A uniform system of weight and measures was established. Sales were expected, and laws in the entire empire codified. The more important note here is that the voyages across the Atlantic were resumed or continued during the reign of Iskosi. Proof of this evidence is by the fact that Columbus was informed by some men when he stopped at one of the Cape Verde islands off the coast of Africa that Negroes have been known to set out from the Atlantic from the Guinea coast in canoes loaded with merchandise and steering towards the west. The same Christopher Columbus was further informed by Indians of Hispaniola when he arrived in the West Indies that they had been able to obtain the gold from black men who came across the sea from the south and the east. The dates of these accounts coincided precisely with the time that Iskosi the Great held sway over Sanghay. It also must be added that the Amerigo Vespucci on his voyage to America witnessed these same black men out in the Atlantic Ocean returning to Africa. 15th and 16th century Spanish explorers and early American art, legend, and burial provide principles of scores of information on what happened to these African seamen after their arrival in the Americas. In effect, the Spanish conquistadors found dispersed all over the New World small tribes who were the very first considered Negroes. The largest Negro colony appears to be a settlement at Durham, where Balboa saw them in 1513 and reported them at war with neighboring Indians. This report was made before the first importation of African slaves to the Achilles, or before any Spanish colonies were founded. Other Negro colonies at the time were discovered in northern Brazil, among the Caracas, St. Vincent in the Gulf of Mexico, where the Black Caribbees resided, and around the mouth of the Orinoco River in Venezuela, and among the Yamasee of Florida. These colonies, it must be stressed, were all reported by the first Negroes who reached the Americas. Even as late as 1775, Franco Garcia was able to come upon a distinct race of black men living side by side with the Zunis in New Mexico Pueblos. He later related that the blacks were the first inhabitants of the area, and suffice to say that the description that he gave leaves no doubt they were Negroes. The observations were made by the same time the French explorer La Perouse, who witnessed a similar phenomenon in California. He also found that a race of blacks who he immediately denoted as Ethiopians included the Autonomies of Mexico, the Cora of Haiti, the Aralos of Syria, the Arvada of the Oracan, and the Pina and the Maras of Brazil, and the Chancas of Darien, and the Albinos of Panama. At this junction, it must be pointed out that the localities of these Negro Indians correspond with the last detail of the area of the early African settlements to be found. Other descendants of pre-Columbian Negroes were either destroyed by the onset of Spanish conquest or eventually absorbed in the slave system. An examination of ancient Indian religion yields information on the condition of the early Africans in the Americas. Several Indian nations such as the Mayans, Aztecs, and the Incas worship black gods along with their other deities. And the Mayan religion in particular exemplified high self-esteem in which the Negroes were held. Among the black deities were Colacozum, the serpent god, and the Messiah, and the Ekosun or the Ekara, the trading god, and the war captain. And the most revealing, they survived portraits show them in black woolly hair and have been unmistakably Negro. It is important to note here that the serpent worship is in the same form and still can be found in Mandingo land today. The Arakara was worshipped as a trader and a warrior, needed little elaboration as the early Africans came to America principally on trade and occasion had to fight for survival. Not only were the African Negroes held in high reverence by the Indians of antiquity, but they appear frequently in early American sculpture and design. Stone statues depicting the African Negro morphology has been discovered through the Americas. The 5 granite stone heads, the largest weighing close to 5 tons, have been found in the canton of Tlaxcala in Veracruz, Mexico. Very little heads of the Ethiopian type have been long type with the paintings of the Negroes having unearthed at Teotihuacan. And the tallest figure of people with narrow heads, thick lips, and short woolly hair is found in Chichen Itza. It should be given special attention that these are often represented as a standard or pastel bearers. They match identically early descriptions of the attendants of the King Court in the Mali Empire. Even as far north as Pecan Point, Arkansas, from Canada to La Penta, pre-Columbian pottery, sculpture, and other objects which demonstrate physiology under the decidedly African ligaments have been retrieved. Furthermore, burial mounds excavated in the United States had discovered fossils containing comparable to West African types, and cow shell we found with them correspond how shell money was often used throughout Africa before colonialism. These discoveries suggest that the penetration and the dispersion of the African trader were extensive throughout the Americas. Pictograph inscriptions observed in the early Western Hemisphere settlements comparatively identical with pre-Arabic writing systems of the Mandingo land and the neighboring nomads of the Sahara. Many of these inscriptions were found in American Indian settlements, have been described by some examiners as those belonging to a visitor, while the African glass and alphabet, in all respect, appear to have been indigenous. Research in this particular area has been retarded by the erroneous theories that the African have been incapable of developing original scripts, or they prefer oral over written means of record keeping. Those who adhere to these values should be made aware that the African above the equator alone has created more writing systems than the European. A total of 19 have been adopted. An inquiry may be made at this point whether some Indians did not succeed in returning back to Africa with the Negro visitors. Evidence is slim in this respect, but there is a looking promising. For example, two modern anthropologists have combined their efforts to demonstrate that certain people living around the Sahara possess American Indian traits. Not only they have similar names and naming methods, but the tribal group is also designated by the same title, differing only in aspects of occasional prefixes and suffixes. Furthermore, the women folk of the same region in all appearance can easily be mistaken for American Indians. Their men, however, are more prone to wear African clothing and exhibit Muslim culture. Also, it must be noted that these nomads reside in tents rather than brick houses, as most of their neighbors. Our cultural anthropologists have shed an additional light on the cross appreciation of the African Negro and American Indians. From time, we learned that certain crops were originated in Africa, such as the yam, the taro, and Pacific cayenne genus, which was found growing in America by Columbus and other Spanish explorers. Moreover, the Indians at the time indicated these crops were somewhat new to them. The same applies to Africa in the case of maize and manhat. These products were indigenous to the Americas and were already being cultivated on Africa's west coast when the Portuguese first arrived there. One examiner studying the maize in particular relates this crop to being unknown in Africa before 900 AD and adds that its introduction was due to early Afro-Indian contacts. The date he gives may or may not be too early, but what is important is that maize is not available in Africa before the first millennium AD, and that it's widely cultivated there in the 15th century. Maize, hamhut, yam, and taro are unique. In that respect, they do not spoil easily, and therefore would have been easily suited for supplying seamen on long voyages across the Atlantic. The earliest long voyages across the Atlantic. The Africans to reach the Atlantic bears little stretch of the imagination. A distance only 1,600 miles separates Africa from South America, and several small islands lying on the way. Besides the northern equator, current starting at the mouth of the Senegal River provides a natural highway to Brazil and the West Indies. This is more likely within the same river in the middle of the ocean to which Abakari captain referred to when he relayed the fate of his convoy. And the path of the current goes too well with the distribution of early American Negro colonies reported by the Spanish. Furthermore, the Gulf Stream departing from Florida provides the same kind of route to North Africa and parts of Europe. At Spain, the Gulf Stream divided itself in two directions, one bending south to Africa, the other bending around the British Isles on its way to Germany and Denmark. This might explain why at least 4 occasions in history, seagoing blacks have reported shipwreck on the north shore of Germany. The ships that have been manned, more important, have been described as canoes, in the same manner as Columbus and Vespucci and the Indians. The sparsity of such incidents are further indicated by the appearance that Europeans had was due to puzzling navigation. Many pieces of the puzzle of pre-Columbian African contacts with the Americans are still missing. But the data dismiss all notions of the circumstances. The circumstance lends to so many positive elements. If the idea of the Vikings landing in North America can be accepted on a thin basis of myth and very few scattered artifacts, then we could possibly conclude behind a larger volume of facts that the West African during the Middle Ages sent explorers to Americas to settle and carry on trade with the Indians. If Song had not been defeated by attacking Moroccan armies in 1591, its survival could have made reconstruction of his Atlantic exploits a simple matter. Renegade Moors under the command of Turkish Dava Pasha ransacked Timbuktu and other intellectual centers, raising libraries and burning books. Scholars were either taken back to Morocco as captive or killed on the spot. It is easy to conceive how these records of the Atlantic expedition might have gone down in ashes. The Songhai soon after fell victim to the ensuing European slave trade and was succeeded in depleting Africa over 100 million of its healthiest and strongest and most talented citizens. It was then a simple task for these slavers to create a derogatory myths on the basis of pillage and depopulate Africa that remained. As a result, these myths which had prevented the honest research and report on African history. The publication of false theories about the African origins and ability was intensified during the colonial period. The colonials' attempts to justify their right to govern Africa by demonstrating that Africans were not capable of ruling themselves. If this could succeed, no one would challenge their exploitation of African resources. Thus, the European writers bred on this concept became interpreters and authorities on Africa's past. Minor concurrence in the greater magnitude of Negro achievement. The 20th century, witnessing a new phenomenon now taking place in Africa, free from colonialism, and with this new freedom, African scholars are coming forward with their own interpretation of history. And it's this new foundation that the greatest present their nationalists are being built. Through these efforts, fresh facts are relatively early to the early African voyages to the America will certainly come to light. Furthermore, it may prove someday to be a minor occurrence in the great magnitude of Negro achievements. So that's when Harold G. Lawrence, out of the Crisis magazine, July 1962, and it tells us about how the Africans is already here in America doing trade and building colonies. I got a lot more stuff on that. I can't really pronounce the Spanish that well and some of the Arabic words, but I'm gonna post a link to this so people can see it for themselves and read it for themselves. But it shows that, we was already here doing what we was doing. So when people say that Africans weren't here in America, it's just too much. But they believe the Vikings were here already and they got a little scant evidence on that. Our people need to stop. Hey, always stay in the present moment and love his ancestors and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe 100. Peace and hotel. Have a wonderful